Je m'excuse, on est quelques minutes en retard. Donc, bonsoir et bienvenue à cette séance publique du Comité de démolition. D'abord, merci à tous pour votre participation ce soir. Vous avez été nombreux à nous faire parvenir des commentaires et à la Ville a pu se rendre compte que l'information concernant le processus entourant les demandes de démolition n'était pas facilement accessible et claire. Cette constatation nous a amenés à nous questionner et ajouter des précisions sur notre site Web. Dans un premier temps, il faut comprendre que les commentaires et les oppositions déposées par toute personne intéressée pendant la période de 10 jours suivant l'avis public doivent porter sur le sujet de démolition et non sur le programme de remplacement préliminaire, qui est parfois appelé à changer, comme c'est le cas pour l'une des demandes de l'ordre du jour de ce soir, 325 Melville. La Ville a retiré du site Web le programme de remplacement préliminaire de la demande sur Melville pour cette raison. Ce qui a pu amener une certaine confusion, nous en sommes conscients. Nous vous invitons à consulter la page de notre site Web concernant les demandes de démolition où un document sur le cheminement d'une demande est maintenant accessible. Dans le cas de 325 Melville, le nouveau programme de remplacement préliminaire devra être étudié plus en profondeur et par conséquent, le comité ajournera sur ce dossier aujourd'hui. Now, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this public meeting. I'll repeat this in English, public meeting of the Demolition Committee. First of all, thank you all for your participation this evening. Many of you have sent us comments, and the city has realized that information regarding the demolition application process was not easily accessible and clear. This has led us to question and clarify the information on our website. First, it is important to understand that comments and objections filed by any interested person during the 10-day period following the public notice must relate to the demolition project and not to the preliminary replacement program, which is sometimes subject to change, as is the case for one of the applications that is on tonight's agenda, 325 Melville. The city has removed the preliminary replacement program from the Melville application for this reason, which we understand may have caused some confusion. We invite you to visit the demolition applications page of our website where a document on how to apply is now available. In the case of 325 Melville, the owner has submitted a new preliminary replacement program, and this will have to be studied further, and therefore the committee will adjourn on this file today on 325 Melville, but not on the Lansdowne file. So there will be, if residents were expecting a final decision on the demolition hearing of 325 Melville, that meeting will be adjourned to a further date. So now we will move into, I hope that is clear. I know that there has been some concern, and I understand we've been through a few demolitions while I've been a councillor and as mayor. And I understand when this happens to a property that is close to you, that you live next to, or that is in your neighborhood, there's obviously a lot of concerns and a lot of questions. And we are very empathetic to that. We are a built city. We value our heritage immensely in this city. We value our architecture. And we think it's very important to hear from citizens on this. This is not, COVID has changed our methods and how we do these things. And typically we would be in the council chamber, and this would be an interactive meeting in that sense. And that is, we have had to adjust, as have all of our residents, in terms of how they work in their daily lives as well. So we are always looking at ways to improve how we communicate in this time. And we will also examine that. So I know that there have been a lot of questions specifically about 325 Melville. I think only one question on the Lansdowne project. So now I guess we go into the first question period before we move to the adoption of the agenda. On va commencer comme ça. On va commencer avec la première période de questions. C'est correct pour ça?
Oui, donc moi, je vais vous lire les questions qui ont été reçues aujourd'hui pendant la journée. Donc, nous avons une... Vous m'entendez bien?
Oui, je vous
OK.
attends.
Donc, nous avons une première question par Paula Lapierre. Question is, how can a building originally consisting of two-story houses, but illegally, parentheses, turned into a 4-apartment rental be even considered for a 4-house, 3-story plus roof gardens development?
So as I said before, that I think what also happened is that perhaps the developer had shared pictures and drawings of a project which is no longer being considered by the city. So I can't comment on the rooftops or the number of stories because we await the analysis of what the new project is. But as the owner, they are within their right to file an application within the city for this. So I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that.
So, second
Next
question. Isn't Westmount supposed to be retaining rental properties?
So who asked that? Sorry, I think we should.
It's the same. It's the same.
Oh, it's the same person. Okay.
Person who asked the question, Paula Lapierre.
Thank you for your question. They are supposed to pertain to the demolition of the building as part of this, but you know, I would answer yes. We think a mix of properties is important in our city to serve different needs of citizens.
Okay. Next question by Gabriela Zeron. Good day. For your information, we received an eviction notice by bailiff due to a demolition of the building December 22nd, 2020, requesting us to leave at the end of our contract in June 2021. The notice had a page indicating that we will receive an indemnity of 3 months rent and they will pay moving expenses. However, the future owner wants us to sign an extension of the lease for indeterminate period of time until he gets the demolition going, and then gives us 4 months notice to leave, and only that way he will pay the indemnity. My question is he obligated to pay me the indemnity even if I leave on first requested date? Because I do not intend to leave only when it best suits him and be living in constant stress and uncertainty.
I'm sorry for the uncertainty that you're living in. I can imagine that that's incredibly stressful. I don't know if I would have to refer to, I guess, legal on that answer.
Well, this is,
or perhaps we can follow up with an answer to that because it's not really pertaining to the demolition per se.
this aspect is really a private matter between tenant and landlord.
Okay, thank you.
Now a question by John Breslau. A demolition proposal can only be evaluated when the benefits and costs of the demolition and the proposed new building are considered. It is for this reason, which is totally sensible, that the bylaws relating to the demolition require detailed plans, required documents for review, a complete set of architectural preliminary drawings illustrating the existing condition and the proposed replacement program, scaled and dimensioned, folded to an 8.5 by 14 format, including a site plan showing setbacks, property lines, existing buildings, new construction or extensions, retaining walls, steps, trees, any mechanical or electrical equipment visible from the outside, a plan of each affected floor, a roof plan, elevations. So the question is, why were the bylaws not followed in this case?
I would thank you, Mr. Breslau, for your question. I think there was a couple questions in there. I might refer to legal on this one.
All required documents were submitted in this application.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to note as well that any conforming, non-conforming preliminary program, that no demolition permit will be granted until the review process is fully completed.
Okay, next question by Julia Rodriguez. Dear Madam Mercer, please see below my question for tonight's meeting addressing the demolition of 325 Melville Avenue. Why would the council allow demolition of a building that has affordable and well-used housing for families?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Rodriguez, and I know that you had emailed as well, and I think you had received some emails on that. I guess it doesn't pertain specifically to the demolition. It's an important one, but we haven't granted a demolition permit for this site. Does anyone else want to comment on that? But I understand what you're trying to say in that, you know, a mix of housing stock in our community is an important thing, and having families live in our city, you know, is, I think, is the goal of everybody. So thank you for your question.
So Madame Rodriguez has a second question, which is, the city's planning program sets out that a residential building should not be demolished to regenerate the property. So why is demolition being considered in this case, which, looking at the proposed development, is an extreme attempt to regenerate the property? Many thanks.
Thank you for your question. I wish I had it written in front of me. I'm gonna have to look at that. Again, the applicant is within their right to apply for the demolition permit. It doesn't mean that they are going to be granted the permit, but they are within their right. Oh, okay. Thank you. You've shared the screen. Thank you. They are within their right, but I do empathize and understand. I know that you live right next to the property, but they do have a right to apply for this file. Does Councillor Peart or anyone else from the administration want to comment on that?
I'll
Councillor Lallam?
Yes, so every property owner has the right to apply for a demolition if their building meets the criteria, i.e. it's category 3, etc. It doesn't mean that it's granted, however. That is the whole point of the demolition committee and hearing, is to evaluate the value of the building and from its heritage point of view, from its sustainability point of view, etc.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez.
Okay, so next question by Peter Hoffman. Is the committee aware that under the Act on Land Use Planning and Development, the landlord of 325 Melville could use the committee's authorization to demolish to evict the tenants? Is the committee aware that other grounds for eviction are extremely remote, absent egregious conduct by the tenants? Why the committee's decision address this point? Will the committee's decision address this point specifically?
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, for your question. And I understand that it causes uncertainty for the residents that are currently living there. But it doesn't need to consider the impacts of the tenants and availability of rental housing, but this is one consideration, and all rights must be considered. Does anyone else want to add to that? And okay, thank you. Next question.
Next question by Mr. Hoffman again. Beyond the street legal requirements, has the committee may perceive them? Is the committee willing to instruct the unelected official or an official of the city to engage in an informal process of dialogue and communication with the immediately affected residents of this project, as it is the custom and practice in many municipalities, such as, for example, the town of Mount Royal?
So this is question number 2 from Mr. Hoffman. I think we we are always looking, I mean, maybe someone from the administration wants to answer this. I'm not sure how the town of Mount Royal manages their demolition hearings, but we can certainly we can look into it. But I know that this isn't ideal for some people. They would prefer to be in the council chamber and be doing this as we have done it in the past. But I know that there has been a lot of back and forth and communication with elected officials and some with the administration as well on this file. But I don't know if anyone from the administration wants to weigh in on this, they can, but we would obviously like more information out, as much information about any project as possible, but it is not just for the neighbors, the adjoining neighbors to, it's not a decision just for the next door neighbor, obviously. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I could add that I think the 10-day period for written comments laid out in the law, as well as the way in which we're adapting the procedure for COVID by accepting written questions here. I understand there's a request for engaging in an informal process of dialogue. I think the formal process of dialogue has been carried out very thoroughly and extensively, as can be evidenced, of course, by the process that we're following today. Communication is absolutely essential. And as I said, I think the legal processes have been followed to the T.
Thank you for that update. And I would also add, if beyond a demolition, if this were a PPC-moi project, or were to be a non-conforming, and they were to apply for a PPC-moi, there are 2 formal consultation meetings for citizens and that would be on the replacement project, not on the actual demolition, which seems to be more of the is the major concern, obviously.
Mayor Smith, if I could jump in for a second. Nothing precludes an applicant from doing this groundwork on their own and reaching out to the potential neighbors and the community to try to generate or gin up some support for their projects, on an informal basis. The responsibility doesn't just have to fall upon the municipality to provide a structure for that. And like I said, I think there's an opportunity for developers or an applicant, if they anticipate some pushback in the community, that they can do some research on their own and start getting out into the community on their own as well. And
yeah,
foresee any friction or pushback that they could receive in the community, and answer questions directly to concerned neighbors. And I think that would only help an applicant's process, or as they proceed through the consideration process for the demolition.
Yeah, and we saw that in a couple different instances at 500 Claremont, which was not, when they began that process, it was not a full demolition, but it was, they did meet residents on site at 500 Claremont, and 4898 de Maisonneuve had several iterations over the years before it actually came through. So it's, but both of those developers had meetings on site. I think I attended one of those meetings with Councillor Breschke for 4898 de Maisonneuve before she was on council and I was the councillor for the district. And it's happened for smaller projects. I know there was a house on Roslyn where there was there was a demolition of an addition on the house on Roslyn, and that owner wrote to all the surrounding neighbors and met with them one-on-one to give neighbors a better understanding of what exactly they were hoping to do. But what happens as well, and this is a natural process, which can also cause a lot of anxiety in the community, is that the project changes. So a preliminary project can look, if you look at what 4898 de Maisonneuve, the original proposal, to what it finally came to be, or is going to be, are very, very different projects. So the same thing with 500 Claremont. The back of 500 Claremont was almost completely glazed over. And and then the final permit approval was quite different and had a much more concentration on the masonry. So it does evolve. It does evolve, but there certainly is nothing, and I think that's what happened. I think some people have seen an original drawing that maybe wasn't even what was submitted to the city from the developer, which I never even saw. So I would answer that, but we certainly will look at, I'm happy to speak to my fellow mayors, specifically the town of Mount Royal, to ask some of their best practices from the city and how they deal with this. So thank you for that question.
Next question by Mr. Hoffman. Did the applicant for 325 Melville submit all the documents set out in section 79 of bylaw 1300? If not all, which ones were not submitted?
I think this question 3 from Mr. Hoffman at this point? Ms. Seymour? Okay, question
Yeah.
3. Question 3. I would hand this over to either the city clerk or to urban planning for they can be more precise on this. I believe that all documents were submitted would be the answer, but I just will confirm with them.
All the document was submitted, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Leroux. Okay, thank you. That's question 3.
Now it's question 4 by Mr. Hoffman. On what date did the members of the committee first receive any documents pertaining to the 325 Melville demolition application? Has the committee reviewed or is it reviewing in today's sitting any of the documents listed in section 79 of bylaw 1300? If yes, which ones? And was a replacement plan or preliminary program one of the documents provided to or reviewed by the committee?
I don't have the exact dates on that. When Mr. Hoffman, so this is question 4 from Mr. Hoffman, that's correct?
Yes.
When he asks the committee, I'm assuming he's referring to the demolition committee and not to the planning advisory committee or any other committee within the city. I would turn that over to the department to see what actual date any documents were filed. And this is what this hearing is for, is to review a preliminary, is part of the demolition is where it would be reviewed. But again, we're not making a decision on this because this has been changed and the applicant has withdrawn that and submitted something new that has not been reviewed by the department yet. So this hearing will be adjourned. No decision is going to be made on 325 Melville. Does anyone else want to add to that or add any more specifics on that? No? I think I answered that question. I'm not entirely sure.
You did.
All right, so 5th question by Mr. Hoffman. Did the committee or any city official request from the applicant, a third-party developer, or an independent third party an appraisal of or assessment or any other information regarding the leases, tenants, or relocation costs for tenants evicted from the building prior to this public sitting of the committee?
So this is question number 5 from Mr. Hoffman on
Yes.
for the record. I don't have an answer to that. I don't think it pertains to the demolition hearing, but if somebody from legal or the administration wants to answer that, I know it's not, certainly we are very sensitive to the stress that this causes the current tenants of that building. But I don't think we have any further information on that, but I will hand it over to the department if legal or urban planning wants to comment on that. No?
I can
I
say it's
would
one of
say-
the criteria that we consider in the analyze and we submit to the demolition committee the information. So at the end, but because we need to redo our analyze with the new plan project, so we need to reconsider. That's it.
Yes. Okay.
And
Councillor Lulham?
leases and tenant relocation costs and the like are matters for the régie, you know, for the Quebec the tenants. The Régie de Logement, I was trying the word of English. The Régie de Logement, those are controlled, they're outside of our mandate.
Okay, thank you for the question, Mr. Hoffman.
Next question by Mr. Hoffman. So in considering the housing needs in the area as required by the Act on Land Use Planning and Development, what documents or information did the committee rely upon? Who prepared or provided this information or such documents?
So are we at question number 6 from Mr.
Yeah.
Hoffman?
Yes.
What documents or information did the committee rely upon? Does the administration want to weigh in on this in terms of the documents that are prepared in demolition hearings? I mean, is it more of a generalized as we look at all demolitions, or is it specific to this site in a built city? Does anyone have any anything to add on that?
The committee's adjourning its decision, so we're not necessarily, the committee has not necessarily completed its analysis on all elements of this question. If as indicated previously, the intention is to, subject the decision of the committee, to be adjourning today. So we're not there yet.
Okay, but as I stated before, we obviously, a mix of housing options for residents is very important to us, whether that be rental apartments or different, you know, whether single family homes, multifamily, it's obviously a mix is important for us.
Next question by François Leroux. Donc, I would like to know if the mayor or any other City of Westmount politician, municipal councillors had ever met, ever wrote, ever speak, or otherwise communicated with the current 325 Melville demolition permit applicant, Darren Reed, or its corporation, or anybody acting directly or indirectly on its behalf. If the answer is a yes, please inform me on the identity of said public office holder, the dates, and the particular purposes of said communications. For greater clarity, my requests do not apply to the City of Westmount non-politician or DG's other directors and or employees.
Thank you for your question. This is Monsieur Leroux who has asked this question.
Yes, François Leroux.
Thank you for your question. I think Mr. Reed has probably met with the administration, I would imagine, on I have no idea how many times he would have met the administration for his application. I have not met with him in any formal way, or I've had no written communication with him or anyone who represents him. He's someone that you see, I've seen on the street and said hello to. I think probably my most recent sighting of him was perhaps at the fruit store on Sherbrooke Street, but I have not had any meeting directly with Mr. Darren Reed. I know that he's worked on other projects throughout the city, so he has dealt with urban planning on a couple issues. I think he's just is in the process. I'm not sure if it's finished, but he's in the process of finishing a project on Hillside, and perhaps I think he's still in the works for another project with on St. Catherine Street, where where Resilience is, where they have given the space to Resilience over the past couple of years while they work on their project. I don't know if anyone else wants to address that.
I will. I've also run into him several times as outside the project on Hillside and Metcalfe, where we discussed that project that's currently being built. I have not discussed the demolition or he asked me if I had seen the proposal for the Melville property. I told him no, I had not, and that was that.
Okay. He has.
I'd also like to add,
Mayor, Councillor Gallery. Yeah.
I had a text from Darren Reed asking to have a conversation, and I said, yes, I'd call him. We spoke for about 2 minutes. He wanted to know if I'd seen the project. I said I had not, and could not discuss it any further. That was it.
Okay. So yeah, there's been no formal communication. I mean, he has dogs and young kids, so he's often on the same route as many, I guess, in terms of being in the park and whatnot, but there has been no formal communication or meeting.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in to
Mr.
say that I have not had any interaction with Mr. Reed in any capacity whatsoever.
Okay.
And if I may, I will also confirm that I have not had any contact with Mr. Reed, nor any developer of any kind. And I can reassure that we have a very strict process in case we ever want to meet with a developer. We do need to go through the lobbying registry to organize such a meeting. So it would be disclosed publicly. So just wanted to
And it would happen with a member of the administration as well.
Madam Mayor,
Happen, Mr. Shammy.
I've never discussed or met with Mr. Reed, for the
Okay.
record.
Thank you.
Madam
Anyone-
Mayor, it's Kathleen. My mother never met with Mr. Reed, for the record, never discussed anything, never seen the man.
Okay. Anyone
Me
else?
neither.
Councillor
Me neither,
Bostock?
unless I've run into him at the Summit Woods with the dogs. I have never met with him.
Okay.
I've never had any communication with this individual.
Okay, thank you. I think that covers all of council, and obviously the administration would have spoken to him.
Next question is by Leslie Hayton. I assume the demolition of 325 Melville is because the building has been condemned. My concern is what will replace it, and will it be in character with the area? As I previously stated in an email to the city regarding this demolition, I fear for the quality of life to the surrounding existing residents. So why the demolition, and what is the plan for redevelopment?
Thank you for your question. The building has not been condemned, but it is, as we just said, that they have withdrawn the plan that they had submitted to urban planning, and they have resubmitted one that has not been analyzed yet. So I can't talk about what that is, but obviously the quality of life and the impact on the neighborhood is very important when we look at any demolition. And we know that, you know, every street is unique in Westmount. And citizens are, it is difficult to not know what is going to go in next to you if someone is truly applying for demolition. Doesn't mean that they're getting it. Just because you ask for a demolition does not mean that the permit is granted. But I guess so. Yes, I can't speak to what the project is because it has not been presented to me, because it had been withdrawn and a new one has been submitted. Does anyone else want to answer on any of that? No? Okay.
So then next question is question number 7 by Peter Hoffman. The last time the demolition committee considered a demolition application was, I believe, in late 2019. Anyone who had filed an objection or comment to the application was invited to speak at the public sitting of the committee. When and how was this long-standing practice changed? Given that Zoom allows participants to speak through the function by which the chair turns on and off their microphone function, why is this vital democratic tradition not being retained for tonight's meeting?
Thank you. So is this question number 6 from Mr. Hoffman?
7, I believe.
This is question number 7 from Mr. Hoffman. Well, wouldn't we all like to go back to what happened in 2019? What happened? COVID happened. And so the process of how we deal with these hearings, how we deal with public council meetings, how we have public consultations has changed. And certainly we have evolved. I mean, we started COVID where we did a phone call for our council meetings, and we have evolved. And so there are as you're speaking, as you know, you have submitted this question, you're able to submit a question with the online form for the second question period. We can certainly look at different Zoom functions, and I'm not sure how other cities are doing it. I don't think they're having people speak on Zoom functions where we have. When we did the public consultation on the park, we had a lot of questions submitted. And gosh, if I try and remember, I mean, I think we probably had over 100 questions. I'm sure Ms. Simard can probably remember better than I did. But we're trying our very best to communicate with citizens and give them an opportunity. So it is obviously, I think we're on question 7 of Mr. Hoffman's today. So he's had an opportunity to ask them, and he will have an opportunity in the third or in the second question period as well. But I like, you know, it's democracy, and the city and the functioning of the city has had to carry on during COVID. And we are, you know, adhering to the process and the guidelines as you know, with this hearing via Zoom. And I think I join everybody, the administration and the council, in that we really look forward to these meetings happening face to face. So get your vaccines and let's all get back into the council chamber is what I would say to that. So it's he's had ample opportunity tonight to ask questions, and he will have second question period. And I know there have been several submissions that he has made. Those will all be part of the consideration of the demolition hearing. So,
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Shammy.
I just want to chime in on this because as for the lay folks, it's important that the point you just made, we're in a pandemic. This is the way we're communicating. Yes, it would be much better if we were in person and Mr. Hoffman can stand at the mic and ask us questions and we could have a dialogue in a proper way, but we can't. This is the way it is. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing the best. We're here to answer. I think the mayor, you're doing a formidable job in going through one by one the questions, and that is what's important.
If I could just add, the administration, we have done our research extensively on this, looking at how this is being done in all other municipalities, and a live verbal participation by residents. No, that's not happening anywhere across the province from the results of our research, at least. We are following the adapted procedures established in the orders that have been issued by the provincial government, following them perfectly, and then going above and beyond as well. You can be certain that the provincial government order does not include a second question period via these types of online means, Zoom or otherwise. We are really doing our utmost to manage this in the best way possible, to encourage the most communication, dialogue, and managing it all accordingly.
Okay, thank you for your feedback. I mean, the other council that I said is obviously the agglomeration council of the city of Montreal, and it is all questions for those council meetings have to be submitted in advance, and there is not a second question period, and they are submitted prior to the meeting. So they are not, you cannot ask questions after the motions that have been passed. But listen, if there's one thing that we've learned from COVID is the rules today may not be the rules tomorrow. And if this evolves, we absolutely will evolve with it. And I get it. There's so many times during this pandemic where would decisions have been made differently if we had all been sitting in a room together and had been able to debate and discuss and, you know, hash things out, perhaps. But we are doing, you know, and I understand that. I mean, primarily these questions have come from neighbors like adjacent to the property, and I get it. It's stressful at any time to have, you know, a demolition and the unknown in your neighborhood, and then to do it via Zoom adds just to that stress. So I get that, and you know, I think council joins me in understanding that, and we trust me when I say that we have heard the concerns of the neighbors, and we take them very, very seriously. So it's but this is part of a process where someone has an applicant has a right to file for this application. So it's, but it is not, is certainly not lost on us, the stress that this causes in the neighborhood. Thank you. Next question.
Next question by Samantha Ayes. So one of two, it's in two parts. So the planning program states that it will provide citizens, the members of council and the administration with a clear reference for any further action affecting the territory of Westmount and related to this cautionary statement. Westmount faces pressures for the demolition of certain residential properties, leading the way to replacement by larger and higher density buildings. Our planning program explicitly states in order to regenerate its population and ensure the tranquility of residential neighborhoods and prevent the demolition of dwellings, Westmount plans to provide opportunities for appropriate low or mid-density residential developments that would be suitable for young families within the new areas identified in the present document as appropriated for revitalization. The site is not in the revitalization. A premature demo approval would pave the way for pressure to proceed favorably into a SKOP process. How is the committee honoring its mandated role to safeguard against the demolition of viable residential properties and ensure protection from inappropriate pressure for development?
So there's two questions, or I guess two steps to that question. And thank you to Ms. Hayes, who does know the city very well, and certainly the urban planning department. Again, this site is not getting an approval tonight for a demolition. And any demolition would be tied to the replacement program. The actual permit would have to, we're not going to demolish buildings and then decide later on what we want. It is, it is important to talk. I mean, she mentions in this opportunities for, and it's as we said, as citizens know, it's a built city. And little by little our population goes down, not by a lot, but it has gone down over the years. So when she talks about mid-density residential developments that would be suitable for young families with a few areas identified in the present document as appropriate for this site is not in the revitalization. I'm not sure what she means. I guess she's meaning that this site was not tagged as a possible revitalization. I'll follow up and clarify that with her. But so all that to be said, there is no demo approval happening tonight. I don't know, does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
I'll make a comment, Mayor Smith. So when she's talking about our current land use document, within it, there are several areas of the city development. It didn't preclude development anywhere else. It was just that those areas, we wanted to make it clear back then when that document was done. We're now doing 2040. But when that document was done, we wanted to favor mid-rise and mid-density residential developments for young families, as we found that a lot of projects were aimed more towards, couple, not enough bedrooms for children and the like.
Mm-hmm. More high-end, that were more high-end condos as opposed to actual housing for families.
That is what we had been seeing, and that was the early 2000s. So, but just to say it, because it specified some particular areas, it didn't preclude the rest of the city.
Yeah, I mean, it specifically highlighted parking lots and things like that, right? Where it looked at like whether on Green Avenue, the parking lot there and things like that, right? Yeah. Okay. But certainly, Ms. Hayes, I will follow up. I know that you had shared some communication with me in a very thoughtful and in-depth document that you sent to all of council today. So thank you for taking the time to write that, and we will review it. I just was able to look at it to scan it quickly because we've been in general committee all afternoon, but I want to thank you for for taking the time, as someone who really understands this process, for taking the time to share that with all of council. So I can assure you that we will all read it in more detail. So thank you for your question.
Next question, again by Samantha Hayes. So 325 viable rental occupied by all ages plus family structures for years represents a valuable housing option. Demolition not urgent, not derelict, does not appear to represent a structural hazard. Minor landscape upkeep deficiencies are not architectural deficiencies. The major defining characteristic respond to Melville streetscape. Bylaw 1305, WRT building line, massing height, attributes type of character, area 22. As stated in our presentation, one cannot make the leap that the unkept quality of the landscape plus peeling paint override these qualities. Architecture, despite alteration, the facade exhibits simple balanced composition, not unlike what would be proposed for new building insertion. Will city consider these readability observable factors?
So will the committee consider these readily? Yeah. The valuable housing option, not urgent, not derelict. So that's, again, I mean, these are all, will be all factors that will be reviewed in the demolition when we have a project to review. But it is, I do like that Ms. Hayes, you know, going back to it's a building for family for all ages. I know that one person who lived in it wrote to me, talked about how their kids go to the local school. These are families that we're trying to attract in Westmount, that, you know, soon Westmount Park School will be full of kids again and the renovation will be complete. So that these are all things that we absolutely will take into consideration. And she talks about the streetscape, which obviously would be part of any demolition consideration as well. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this or have anything else they want to add? A lot of it is architectural questions.
Mayor Smith, I will point out that this is one of the questions that is, so this out of the long series of questions that we've received, this is one which is really focused on the demolition. So I certainly appreciate the points that have been surfaced here, and these are the kinds of points that the demolition committee should and will take under consideration. Like I said, because they are applicable to what we're considering today, or well, not today, but I mean when we do reconvene for the subsequent meeting, and we're not, these questions or these points are not they're not pertaining to the replacement project. So. I thank you for these questions, and they're important and pertinent. Thank you.
And she, Ms. Hayes also refers to character area 22. So for residents who don't know that, the city is divided up in different character areas where they have, where, you know, the character areas are very explicitly detailed. So it's, I'm assuming this is probably also in the submission that she shared with council tonight. So again, I'd like reverting back to that. We will, all of council will read that with great attention. So thank you for the question, Ms. Hayes.
Maintenant de Monsieur Hugues Gagnon. Bonjour, voici ma question et ses sous-questions. Est-ce que le projet répond aux normes prescrites? Si le projet n'est pas de plein droit, est-ce une dérogation mineure? Est-ce une dérogation majeure? Quelle est la réglementation concernant l'implantation au sol? Considérant l'ampleur du projet en relation avec notre milieu, notre secteur, je m'oppose à la démolition du 325 rue Melville et je demande une révision du projet.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur Gagnon. Puis pour les premiers 3 questions, comme j'ai annoncé au début de la réunion, c'est le projet que je pense que vous avez, j'imagine que Monsieur Gagnon a vu un projet, je pense que c'était comme circulé pour les voisins. Ça, c'était retiré, puis il y a une révision qui a été soumise au département, puis ils sont en train de faire le travail qu'il a besoin de faire avant qu'il en a une autre réunion pour la démolition. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui veut répondre à ça?
Si vous permettez, mairesse,
Oui,
on pourrait
Madame
souligner, oui, on pourrait souligner aussi que nous n'avons pas de réglementation pour une dérogation mineure. Et en ce qui concerne d'autres dérogations, on a le PPC-. Alors, c'est le règlement pour
Oui.
les projets particuliers. Donc, ça répond un petit peu à la question 1 et 2.
Oui, et si c'est un PPC-, il va y avoir 2 réunions publiques pour les citoyens pour parler du projet.
Exactement. Merci.
Un qui est au début du projet, avant que le projet est au CCU, puis un à la fin de ça, à la fin de la processus. S'il y a d'autres commentaires sur ça? Le département ou... non? OK. Merci, M. Gagnon, pour la question. Et vous êtes... Oui, un autre voisin. OK.
Maintenant, une question par Robert Babsac. I am restating this question, which went unanswered at the March 1st, 2021 council meeting. Looking at the building at 325 Melville, the building appears fully occupied and in good shape. It does not appear to pose any danger to the inhabitants or the public. Is this a new position of the city that viable residential buildings can be demolished and replaced with larger buildings?
Look at the building, the building appears fully occupied and in good shape. It does not appear to pose any danger in public. Is this? So certainly that all of those aspects would be reviewed by the demolition committee. And no, this is not a position. I think I answered this at the council meeting at the beginning of March. We do not have a policy that the city wants to take viable residential buildings and demolish them. There's obviously a very a process with a lot of scrutiny, but the owner is allowed to ask for that, but it does not mean that they are going to be granted a demolition permit. But no, and I mean, I would add this. It's I think if you look around, there have been very few demolitions in the city of Westmount. Certainly in this mandate, there have been very few. And again, we are a built city with a mix of, we have very few lots that are either, that are empty. I mean, I bet Councillor Peart would know the answer to that. In terms of residential lots, we have probably less than 5, I would say, that are actually empty and ready to be built upon. But no, it's not, we're not in the business of seeking out what we can demolish. And this is not driven by us as well. The developer this person has bought a building and submitted his application. And he is following the process for that. But this is certainly not, this is not driven by the city from a policy that we had wanted this building demolished. Not at all. So, but thank you for your question, and I see from the address that you live next door. So I get the uncertainty of that. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
There is 3 more questions that came in right before the end time, so I will read them to you. They're not in my my document, but I will have them open and read them to you. Okay,
so I'll try and take notes and hopefully answer them.
So I think it's question number 8 by Mr. Hoffman, I believe. The city's website under demolition states that among other documents to be submitted by a demolition permit applicant, the application must include a set of scaled plans for public display. Where are these plans displayed publicly for 325 Melville? If they are not publicly accessible, why not?
Thank you, Mr. So this is question number 8 from Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
I would turn that over to the department in terms of the scale drawings and the documents, because they have obviously a better understanding of the full set of documents. Does anyone have an answer to that? Madame Kropas, do you have?
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, it's not mandatory to provide the plans, the scale drawings or whatnot of the replacement program to the public. However, we do have documentation on the existing building. There's a heritage report that was submitted for the application, and all documentation on the existing building can be viewed through an access of documentation that's made through the legal department.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Madame Kropas. Is that it for that question from Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Okay.
The next question is by Robert Babsack again. So by city zone admission of error in posting and then subsequent removal of the replacement program, the process of the demolition presented to the citizen of Westmount is opaque and unfair in relation to what has been standard procedure for decades. One cannot escape the impression that there is intentional lack of transparency. In light of these developments, would City consider restarting the process, giving all parties involved opportunity to voice their opinion, thus allowing its own citizens and taxpayers resemblance of a democratic civic engagement?
Thank you, Mr. It was Mr. Babsack,
Yes.
who I wish I could see this question. Thank you for your question. I know that caused some uncertainty, and it went up, it came down. It was there was some issue there. I can assure you that was not the intention. The intention is not to hide anything. We know that citizens absolutely need to be engaged in this. When you buy a house, you want to know what's going to be next door to you. If you've lived in a house for 30 years, you want to have some understanding and some control over what is going to be within your neighborhood. As all that being said, that this project has been it evolves. So it's a new project has been submitted. I'm unsure. I don't know what that is. Very recent. I don't know what that project entails. But we certainly we know that it caused some confusion. So I think I addressed this at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
I will. I would say that, it's important that we look at the existing building. It's not a, the merit should be on the existing building, as
and whether it's worthy of demolition.
Yes, exactly. And many of the items that Samantha Hayes pointed out, is it architecturally strong, structurally sound? Does it have heritage value? All those things is what we need to look at, not can you replace it with something prettier or whatever. I think it's more important that we base it on the existing building. In the past, when we have had, when the law was applied differently, and we did have, often it was a preliminary program that changed a great deal, to what was eventually built. So I have to say that I much prefer that the demolition hearing be on the merits of the demolition, and on the merits of that building, as it should be.
Yeah, and no actual demolition permit is granted without an approved project. We will
not make a vacant lot.
We will not have vacant lots. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that or has any other feedback on that. I think we all recognize that there was frustration in the community and the neighbors, and wanting to have more information. And I think as Councillor Peart explained well, is in that it's a two-step process, and what Councillor Lellem had just brought up, and what we are looking at is the actual demolition of a building, which we do not take lightly. We absolutely do not, even for Category 3 buildings, we do not take that lightly, and it is not an easy process. I mean, if you look around the city, it's not something that you see. It's very, very rare. Next,
If
are
I
there any
could
other?
chime in for just a
Councillor Peart?
second. I certainly appreciate the community's anxiety and their hesitance when a new project like this is being proposed, and especially when now with the process being separated into something very distinct from what we were, or at least different from what we are accustomed to previously. And as Councillor Lullen was saying before, the advantage of this is that we could really focus on the first step, and the first step being the demolition. And when we're really reviewing the project on its own merits to see if it qualifies for a demolition. Previously, it was a little bit transactional in a way where understandably a resident would look at it and say, okay, well, I might give this up if what I'm getting in return is greater. And I understand somebody making that very reasonable calculation. The risk with that is you may potentially give up something prematurely. You may be dazzled by the shiny object and make a rash or reactive decision. This way, it allows us to be a little bit more considerate, to step back and look at the object that's in front of us, and that's the existing building, and to evaluate that on its own merits before we move on to the next step. So that's an advantage I see in this new process and this new procedure, and I acknowledge that it comes with its challenges, because I can also understand that people will want to try to understand, will be very curious and ask a very reasonable question. Well, what am I getting in return? So we do have procedures in place to evaluate a conforming project. We have procedures in place that will evaluate a non-conforming project. So I hope that the community is reassured in knowing that if and when a demolition is authorized, the replacement project will meet the standards that have already been set by the city, and that we not collectively that we're not fearful of change just because we are accustomed to what we know. I mean, it's not for nothing that a building immediately adjacent to the project is the result of a demolition, right? And I mean, it's 7 houses that were built on a building that was taken down 50 years ago. So a city changes over time, and we just have to make sure that we're deliberate in our measures, that we are considering these issues that are in front of us, and that we take the time to review. And as we've seen by the great length and depth of the questions that we've received, there's a lot of interest. People take it seriously, and we know that you take it seriously, and because of that, we take it seriously. So I'll finish on that.
Yeah, and I mean, just to follow up on that, there's 2 angles, right? If it's a conforming project and it's asking for a demolition, there is a route there, and then it's obviously any demolition permit would be tied to whatever that approved project is. But if it's a non-conforming project, there is even more ability for citizens to be engaged in that. So that is so the Pépé c'est moi bylaw, the Skyope, as we say in English, we have not done one of those in the city of Westmount. Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I am right on this. We have not done a full demolition with a Pépé c'est moi at this point in the city of Westmount. Councillor Lullen is looking at me like I am incorrect there, but I do not believe that since that bylaw has been adopted, we have had a full an application for a full demolition and a Pépé c'est moi. So there are processes in place to deal with those 2 angles. So, but I am, as we said, this project has been withdrawn. A new one has been submitted, of which I don't have the details on. So, but thank you for your question on that. I mean, we could talk about this for hours in terms of the housing stock and the importance of mixed housing stock in the city. And I mean, this street alone is like walking distance, almost spitting distance for about 5 different schools. Like it sits on the park. It's on the flats. As 2-second walk to my pediatrician's office, things like that. So we understand this neighborhood. We understand this neighborhood well. So thank you for that question. Are there any more questions?
There's one more question that came in right before the end of the first period question. So it's by Samantha Ace again. So does the committee recognize that outside the area for revitalization and specifically with respect to pressure for demolition and redevelopment, the planning program is clear, stating that the city's role in these residential areas is to maintain its very strict zoning policies that exclude any significant modification of the land use and continue to rigorously apply its demolition bylaw?
So I mean, yes, I would. I mean, in a one-word answer, yes. The city understands that. It is important to us. It is not something, as I have stated several times tonight. Obviously the heritage of our building, the housing stock in our community is unlike any in Canada, for a collection of homes, of Victorian era homes that we've worked really hard at to continue to protect. And I think this council has continued to work hard at it. We've placed a great importance on heritage. So all of those things are absolutely taken into account as this process would unfold. Does anyone else want to add to that? Any councillors want to weigh in on that, or anyone from the administration? No, okay.
That's it for the first questions received today.
Okay, so we move to, so now that takes care of the first question period, and there is an online form where you can, I guess you put the Q&As are in the chat. Is that how we are?
The second question period will be using the Q&A icon at the base of your screen, and that is for all the attendees today. So I can already see that we received some today, but this is for the second question period.
Okay, okay, so I see those popping up as well. I haven't had a chance to read them yet. Okay, so now we move to the adoption of the agenda. La première période de questions est finie, donc l'adoption de l'ordre du jour, Madame Breshke.
I move that the agenda of the Demolition Committee sitting of March 15, 2021 be adopted.
Thank you. And a seconder on that would be Councillor Peart. All in favor? Carried. So item number 4 is that the purpose of this meeting is to consider the demolition for applications submitted for the immovables at 314, 316 Lansdowne, 314, 316 Lansdowne Avenue, and was on the agenda for 325 Melville Avenue, in accordance with the Act respecting land use, planning and development, as well as bylaw 1317 on demolition. Ms. Kropas, the urban planning advisor, Ms. Yuki Kropas, the urban planning advisor of the urban planning department, will present the demolition project, specifically of 314, 316 Lansdowne. And any interested persons who sent either their comments or oppositions to the city clerk's office within the prescribed time period have been invited to make representations and questions to the committee using the online form made available within the prescribed hours. Once the committee has heard all of those who would like to make the statement or questions, it will have the opportunity to withdraw and deliberate on the project. The committee will render a decision or adjourn the meeting to render a decision at a later date. A second question period will be available to the public via Zoom webinar. All questions must relate to the demolition application. So item number 5, the review of the application 325 Melville Avenue. The committee reviews the application to demolish the movable located at 325 Melville Avenue. And 5.1 would be that the city's clerk's office prior to tonight received 1 letter from a resident expressing no opposition to the demolition application and 8 residents' letters of opposition to the demolition application within the prescribed time period. Would it be appropriate at this time, I would ask, I guess, the city clerk and Madame Cropus, if we move into 5.2 at this moment, or Ms. Cropus, do you have anything to present on this before we?
I don't have a presentation for 325 Melville this evening, as the project has been adjourned to a later date, but I do have a presentation for 314 and 316 Lansdowne.
Okay, so then I would ask the city clerk at this point, we move 5.2 to adjourn it officially. Okay, so I will hand that over to Councillor Peart, who I would say it's important to read the whereases in this instance.
Indeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas on November 16th, 2020, an application for demolition permit was submitted to the City of Westmount for the complete demolition of a Category 3 residential building located at 325 Melville Avenue. Whereas on February 9th, 2021, the public notices required by law and under the bylaw of the City of Westmount were published. Whereas on February 10th, 2021, a notice was posted on the proposed demolition site. Whereas opposition letters were received from 8 residents by the city clerk's office, as well as a comment from 1 resident. Whereas the applicant has submitted a new preliminary program for the utilization of the vacated land on March 4th of 2021 to the Urban Planning Department. Whereas prior to the Demolition Committee's consideration of an application, the file must contain the recommendations of the Board of Inspections and the Planning Advisory Committee. Whereas in accordance with Section 20 of the Bylaw 1317 concerning demolition, the Demolition Committee may adjourn its public sitting as often as it deems necessary during the consideration of an application. I move that the public sitting of the Demolition Committee be adjourned to a later date in order to obtain the recommendations of the Board of Inspections and the Planning Advisory Committee following the submission of a new preliminary program by the applicant on March 4th, 2021. That the subsequent sitting of the Demolition Committee be announced by public notice.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peart. Do I have a seconder on this motion to adjourn this? Councillor Lulham. Do you have any further comments on this?
It's just worth underlining or repeating again that the plan most recently received needs to go through the process, be reviewed by the Board of Inspections, be reviewed by PAC, and at that point we will be able to continue the consideration.
Perfect. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Now we move to the second question period for this. Are we going to lump the second question period in with the, and I shouldn't say lump, but are we going to do the second question period with the Lansdowne project to the city clerk, or are we going to deal with the second question period immediately?
We should take do our second question period for Melville right away, and then we'll do a second one. Anything received, anything on Melville has to be received now, of course. That's it.
Okay, so I would turn it over to Ms. Simar. Then are you going to go through the ones that are on the chat? Is that how we will?
It's the Q&A icon, so it's different than the chat. You can see it at the bottom of your screen, Mayor Smith. You can open it too because you can see the question also. So we will start with Shayla Mason. How can citizens assess the question of demolition without having any idea about what might replace the building at 325 Melville?
Well, I think we've addressed this a couple times, but it's a very, very good question in that it is, I mean, they're obviously very linked. And I think it was Councillor Peart who, or maybe Councillor Lundholm, I'm not sure, I can't remember which one, who addressed it in that we really have to look at in a two-step process, but of course it matters what the replacement is, and no demolition would happen without that replacement, but that we need to begin by looking at the building. And is it worthy of demolition? I think we've heard from a lot of a lot of attendees tonight that they really don't feel that it is. So that we take all of that into account. But there are very specific criteria to be met if you're going to have if you plan on demolishing a building in a city like ours. Anyone else want to add to that?
No, I think you said it, Mayor Smith, and it really, we have to decide on the value of the building first before we decide on the project that replaces it. And without a project, an acceptable project to replace it, the demolition won't happen either. So
yeah,
they both go together, but the first step is the value of the building. And many of the questions that have come up tonight, these types of issues have been underlined, and exactly that's what we need to look at. Is this a viable building?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, it's the starting point for
Yes.
these discussions really is what's there and is it viable? It's not an easy process to demolish a building in this city. And I think I speak on everyone's behalf is that we want to keep it to be an incredibly rigorous process. And one where the applicant really has to do their really has to make their case, and obviously the city has to very much do their due diligence on this. But it is not something it's not something that we take lightly.
And the criteria for the demolition was adopted by the city to make demolition really a very rare occurrence, because for the majority of our housing and building stock, they would never be worthy of a demolition. So it's really the exemption.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the hard work of the previous the PACs. We have a PAC with a very long history. We have the administration and the elected officials over the years that have all had the common goal of protecting these the housing stock in the city. There's very unique housing stock in our city, and so we take it very seriously. It's not something that we would look at to see, what I think it was referred to, what's the shiny object it can be replaced with. So
we have a federal heritage designation for the majority of our city, which is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. And and with the goal of being a place where families and people want to live, because we have these unique homes, but we also have the proximity to parks and our a huge amount of schools we have 13 schools in a 2x2 kilometer city. There's it's very there's a lot of reasons to protect the housing of this city. So. Okay, next question.
Next question by David Ben-Sadoun. Thanks, Mayor Smith. One quick question. If the demolition process is not connected to the new building permit process, wouldn't the developer worry that they'd spend the money on demolition without knowing what they'll be allowed to build? Are we at risk with ending up with an empty lot and evicted tenants?
Thank you, Mr. Ben-Sadoun, for your question. Absolutely, that's what we would not permit. So the actual permit would be connected to the replacement program, so that we would not be in a situation where we evict people to have an empty lot and have neighbors staring out on an empty lot. Does anyone else want to answer that or weigh in on that? But I know that that's like with sort of the two-step process of that's a concern of people, and I get that. That is we've had a couple spots across the city where there have been empty lots. There was the building on Dorchester that is next to the old nurses building at the corner of Green and Dorchester there. That that's an empty lot. That's terrible for the neighborhood.
But they were all by fires.
Yeah, that was by fire. So it's taken a while, and there is something in the process there, but it's I can assure you nobody the goal is absolutely not that, or that just wouldn't be allowed. So
it can't happen.
Can't happen. So does anyone else want to weigh in on that? No? Okay, next question.
Next question by P. Santini. What is the city doing to help the tenants of 325, 327 Melville from lease coming due, upkeep of the property, compensation for moving?
So thank you. I mean, I get it. There's people that live there that this is very unsettling for them, but this is really like, that is an area that is between the tenant and the landlord. I think the city clerk wants to weigh in on that.
Thank you. Well, I'll actually take the opportunity to address this question. And at the same time, we have another question from Peter Hoffman. And it's very much on a related topic. So I'll read that one right now. The city clerk's answer to a tenant's question was that it's a private matter. Is he aware of section 148.0.10 of the Act respecting land use, planning and development, which states that the committee must consider the prejudice caused to lessees and the possibility of relocating the lessees in its process? In other words, the Act requires consideration of exactly the issues raised by the tenant in the first question period. In fact, Mr. Hoffman, that was not the issue that was raised in that question. This question as well, we are now getting into the details of relations between the tenant and the landlord. The city, of course, as you point out, does have to consider the impact on the lessees and the availability. I'll take the exact words from law. The prejudice caused to the lessees and the housing needs in the area and the possibility of relocating the lessees, but it's not the city's job to involve itself in the relocating or in determining the indemnities that are due to those tenants. That is, of course, a private matter. Thank you.
Or the Régie des Logements. They can always file a complaint.
Well, of course, they are the ones who deal with those private matters between tenant and landlord, as previously stated.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Samantha Hayes.
Samantha Hayes, Mayor Smith, you are careful to make special note of people asking questions who live nearby, which suggests that this file is only of interest for immediate neighbors. This diminishes the importance of the larger question relating to the preservation of housing and appropriate development in the appropriate agreed upon places. Following the city's own planning program is not of primary concern for all citizens, particularly with respect to the 30+ category 3 sites within the lower territory. Are you suggesting that only immediate neighbors would be concerned by the precedent that this file could present?
Absolutely not. And I think anyone who's in public service or in public life knows that precedent, that, you know, what you do for one, you do for all, and that when you look at these things, that we have to look at it, you know, holistically for the city. But it is, I think it's also important to note, and it's not me being dismissive of anyone who lives nearby. I think it's important, and it matters when you live nearby. And primarily the people that we have heard from live within the, you know, our adjacent neighbors, or within very close distance of this. And I think that, you know, that's important. The people of this neighborhood care about this and are invested and want to make sure that either the building is preserved, or if it is deemed worthy of demolition, that whatever is there absolutely integrates with the character neighborhood and obviously needs to respect the planning program. But I know that this is precedent setting, and it is not to say that, you know, all there was you know, some commentary written to me that, you know, basically this is open season on every house in Westmount. That's absolutely not the case. But this person the owner of this building has made an application, and we are going through the process of that. But I do think, you know, neighbors that live by, like they have a perspective of the street and the neighborhood. So it's absolutely not me being dismissive, but I think it's worthy to note when if you are the direct neighbor, of which, you know, when the people that have written me have often noted that they are the direct neighbor or close by, have often mentioned that in their communication with me. But it was, I absolutely not. This is for all citizens. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I think it is important to note, of course, as is raised here, you know, suggesting that only the immediate neighbors would be concerned by the precedent that is followed. The fact that we're only, I mean, the vast majority, if not all of these questions are coming from the immediate neighbors, demonstrates where the concern is coming from. Of course, this is a matter that concerns the entire city, but it is also always interesting to note when the criticisms come from such a concentrated, localized area, when, of course, as you said, this is something that is of the broader interest of the entire city, with no oppositions being heard outside of that very small localized area.
I would add that the demolition bylaw, you know, when it was adopted, everybody had the opportunity to weigh in on it. Now we're working on 2040, and I would say to the citizens, you know, hearing the concerns that they have, that we've had some good participation so far in 2040, but I would urge citizens to get more involved. This is where, in the Land Use Act, that you can really put an emphasis on having family style apartments, that maintaining housing stock and, you know, lower cost apartments, et cetera, is really important. And the 2040 offers that opportunity for all the citizens in Westmount to participate. So I would put out that message.
Yeah, it's a very good, that's a very good point, and a reason why, like, this is a very concrete reason why urban planning renewal is necessary, so that citizens can weigh in on these things and make sure that, you know, if you want a city where families want to live, then we hope that you get engaged in the urban planning renewal. And, you know, it's a challenge for cities everywhere, in that if you look at the growth maps, they're all, it's in beyond the suburbs now. I mean, it's like, would we have even called Mirabel the suburbs before? But I mean, now, so the growth there is significant, and the growth on the island of Montreal is flat. So it's this is why it's, you know, we want to be a city where families want to live, and with that comes parks and schools and people and commercial sectors and the right mix of housing. So it's anyways, thank you for, I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
I would only say that I see that questions are still coming in.
So where are we at? Well, no, because we're on the second question period. Are we Ms. Simard, how are we going to, should I just go through the next questions? I see a bunch from.
But have we stopped taking questions, or?
Because we have another.
We have not stopped, okay.
Taking question. Andrew, is there a specific amount of time that we have to dedicate to the question period? Should we stop taking questions in right now and go through the ones we received?
I think we can go through the ones we've received, and I would imagine that we've kind of exhausted the issue at a certain point. But
there's a specific question about, and perhaps I spoke out of turn in terms of a document that Ms. Hayes had sent to council as something that we would all read. I'm not sure if and this is anonymous, so I don't love answering questions not to anonymous, but certainly if they want to email me, we can get them back a response on that. Is that the best way to go about that? I'm not sure I can share a document that I am not the author of, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that document was not sent with a request for it to be read at the meeting.
Yeah. So, okay. So that it's,
An access request could be made.
Okay, okay. And then the next are a group of questions from John Breslaw, as opposed to the statement that there's no legal, the preliminary program to the public. This is not true. I would hand that over to the city clerk to respond to. The first question of John Breslaw has got, I think, 5 in a row there.
It is true.
Okay, the committee.
The attendees cannot see the questions.
Oh, okay,
Only
sorry.
when we answer them. So if
Okay.
you can just state them, I can do it, or you can do it.
You can continue to do it, Mr. Martin. I think that's the
Okay.
best way to do it.
So Mr. John Breslaw, as opposed to the statement that there is no legal requirement to present the plans, the preliminary program to the public, this is not true.
It is in fact true. Thank you.
Okay, so this has been answered. Now, preliminary program shall mean and include a preliminary program for the reutilization and land vacate as the result of the proposed demolition of any building or buildings. The committee shall consider the file, including without limitation, the application, the preliminary program, objection, and submission at a public sitting.
I don't see a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There's no question here. Next.
Okay.
Next. All relevant documents concerning this demolition application, including plans, may be consulted on the city's website. So these preliminary plans must be available to the public on the city's website as required by Law 1317.
I will leave that to the city clerk and to urban planning if you want to address that one.
All documents required for the consideration, for the public's consideration of this demolition application for the purpose of submitting comments in the written consultation period. Sorry, the 10-day period for receiving written comments or oppositions have been made available. It's everything that's required to be available is available.
Okay, thank you.
So, Michaela W. Good evening. We are tenants of 325 Melville and are curious when a decision will be rendered as whether the demolition will take place or not. We feel as if we are living in limbo, not knowing when or if this will indeed be occurring.
So I don't have a date set for the next demolition hearing, but I know that that's not what you would want to hear, because I'm sure you want a definitive answer, but I don't have, when we can, we will certainly publicize that on our website and all of our different social media platforms.
Now, question by Samantha Hayes. Was the building condition assessment for 325 Melville supplied by the applicant, or was it prepared by an independent consultant?
I would leave that to the urban planning department to answer if they have the details on that. And if not, we can get back to Ms. Hayes.
Yes, good evening. I don't have the direct answer for that, seeing as the analysis of the current building is done by the Board of Inspections. But I do take note of this question and I can get back to the applicant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman, will the Urban Planning Department or the Demolition Committee require an independent structural engineer assessment of the condition of 325 Melville at the expense of the applicant? Will that document be made public as, for example, is the case in TMR?
I will leave that one as well to the department to discuss about the specifics of the documents that are required for a structural engineer assessment. Does anyone from urban planning want to address that?
Yes, I can also confirm that this is a review by the Board of Inspections, the structural assessment. So I would have to check in with the building chief inspector and the division chief to assure that, well, all required documentation has been submitted and received. But I would have to get back to the applicant or the person who's asked this question regarding the answer.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Hoffman, for your question. Next question, and I think that's the last question on this, and then we will move on to Lansdowne.
So the last question, does the council realize that with current policy, you are creating a perverse incentive for landlords to stop taking care of property and surroundings in the hope of having an opportunity to apply for a demolition permit? This opens up to the possibility to get rid of tenants and build much larger structures.
Thank you, Mr. Farage, for your question. And I'll turn it over to other, if any members of council or the department want to talk about this, but that is, absolutely not the case. And
interestingly, the Quebec government just came out with an announcement that they're going to change legislation very shortly, if not already in the act, to disallow demolition by neglect.
Yeah,
they're going to give us tools to do that, as well as very heavy fines. So that's the good news. So no, that this does not lead to people doing that, because again, the demolition application doesn't guarantee them that the building's going to get demolished. And
yeah,
if they think they're just going to let it rot, we don't allow that. We don't already, and we certainly won't moving forward.
No, and our inspectors are there to deal with that as well. Is anyone from urban planning want to address that? No, okay. Is that it for questions at this point on this subject?
Yes,
on 325.
If I could just jump in just to follow up on Councillor Lallam's point, we're not creating a policy. There's, as Councillor Lallam said, anybody at any point in time can apply for demolition. It doesn't mean, and it forces us to consider it, but it doesn't force us to accept it. And this is, I mean, ostensibly somebody could, with a category 1, could do exactly the same. It does, and we have to consider all of these applications. And so we're not creating a policy. It's the business is as usual. We will consider what is presented to us, and no decision is being made today, and we're not making any precedents today. When that time comes, we will give it the consideration that is due. So it's like I said, we're not setting new policy today.
Thank you, Councillor Peart. Okay, so I think that wraps up for that second question period pertaining to Melville. So now we move into the review of application 314-316 Lansdowne Avenue. And I would now turn it over to Ms. Yuki Kropas, the Urban Planning Advisor, who will present the demolition proposal on this project of 314-316 Lansdowne Avenue. And I guess I would note at this point that we received one letter regarding the demolition application within the prescribed time period in which no opposition to the demolition was expressed. So Madame Kropas, over to you.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be presenting the demolition application presentation for 314-316 Lansdowne. Je vous présente ce soir la présentation de la demande de démolition pour 314-316 Avenue Lansdowne. I'll have to scroll through the presentation in this format, seeing as it's not liking my full screen. Donc, je vais continuer dans ce format puisque ma présentation ne semble pas avancer dans le full screen. Donc, je vais commencer la présentation en passant par les points majeurs d'une procédure, le cheminement d'une demande de démolition. Donc, la première étape d'une demande de démolition est le dépôt de la demande de démolition. Ensuite, l'analyse préliminaire de la demande de démolition qui se fait par le Bureau des inspections. Ensuite, la publication de l'avis public. Donc, suite à l'analyse préliminaire de la demande, on procède avec la publication de l'avis public, qui est une période de 10 jours pour recevoir les commentaires des citoyens. La prochaine étape est la soumission du dossier au Bureau des inspections et au Comité consultatif d'urbanisme pour leurs recommandations. La prochaine étape est l'étude de la demande par le Comité de démolition lors d'une séance publique. Donc, c'est l'étape qu'on complète ce soir, c'est la séance publique. La prochaine étape est l'affichage de la décision du comité de démolition avant l'émission du permis. Dans ce cas, ici, ce soir, on a séjourné la demande de démolition à une date ultérieure. La prochaine étape est le droit d'appel devant le conseil municipal de la décision du comité de démolition des personnes intéressées. Et finalement, l'émission du permis. S'il vous plaît, prenez note que cette information est disponible sur notre site web. I'll begin the presentation by outlining the key points of the demolition process. The first step of a demolition process is the reception of the demolition application to the city, followed by the preliminary analysis of the application, which is completed by the Board of Inspections. Once the demolition application is complete, the publication of the public notice takes place. This is a 10-day period where citizens can submit their comments and oppositions to the city. Following this step is the submission of the file to the Board of Inspections and the Planning Advisory Committee for recommendations. Following this step, the assessment of the application by the Demolition Committee at a public sitting. So this is the step that we are currently at this evening. Following this step, the publication of the Demolitions Committee decision prior to the issuance of the permit. In this evening's case, the demolition application has been postponed to a later date. There's no decisions being made this evening. Following this step, the right of appeal to the City Council of the Demolition Committee's decision by any interested person. And finally, the last step is the issuance of the permit. As I mentioned in the previous slide, all of this information and flowchart is available on the city website. Le règlement de démolition 13-17 sur les démolitions a les critères et conditions suivantes. L'article 24 stipule qu'aucune demande de démolition n'est approuvée par le comité à moins que les conditions suivantes ne soient remplies. Toutes les procédures établies par le présent règlement et qui régissent la demande et le programme préliminaire ont été observées. Le comité est convaincu de l'opportunité de la démolition compte tenu de l'intérêt public, de l'intérêt des parties et plus particulièrement de l'état de l'immeuble ou des immeubles visés dans la demande, de la détérioration de l'apparence architecturale ou du caractère esthétique du voisinage, du coût de la restauration, de l'utilisation projetée du sol dégagé et de tout autre critère pertinent. The Demolition Bylaw 1317 has the following conditions and criteria. Article 24 stipulates that the committee shall not approve the application for the proposed demolition unless and until all the procedures established by this bylaw governing the application and the preliminary program have been observed, and the committee is convinced the proposed demolition is advisable, taking into account the public interest and the interest of the parties, and in particular, the condition of the building or buildings contemplated by the application, the deterioration of architectural appearance or aesthetic character of the neighborhood, the cost of the restoration, the intended use of the vacated land, and any other pertinent criterion. La demande 314-316 Lansdowne est une demande de démolition complète, située au 314-316 Lansdowne, évidemment. Le type de bâtiment est un bâtiment détaché 2 étages résidentiel. The current application is an application for a complete demolition located at 314-316 Lansdowne, obviously. The building type is a 2-story detached building and is currently and always was a residential building. Ici, on le bâtiment sur rue. Donc, vous voyez que le bâtiment en question est encerclé d'un cercle pointillé orange. Here we see the context of 314-316 Lansdowne in its street context. Again, as I mentioned in French, it's highlighted by an orange dotted line. Le bâtiment à démolir datant de 1909 est un bâtiment détaché de 2 étages recouvert de briques avec sous-sol. Il est à noter que le garage datant de 1924 en cour arrière est exclu de la demande de démolition. The 1909 building to be demolished is a 2-story detached brick building with a basement. It is noted that the rear yard garage is excluded from the demolition application. Le bâtiment en question est dans le secteur patrimonial 30, nommé Lansdowne et Roslyn au sud de Sherbrooke, et est un bâtiment de catégorie 2. The building in question is a building in the Heritage Character Area 30, Lansdowne and Roslyn, south of Sherbrooke, and is currently a Category 2 building. Ici, on voit les élévations d'origine de l'architecte Edward Maxwell du bâtiment 1909. Here we see the archived elevation by Edward Maxwell, the architect Edward Maxwell of 1909. As you can see in the original footprint, the building was mainly a square-shaped plan. Dans cette planche, on voit l'évolution du bâtiment au fil des ans. Il y a eu plusieurs modifications et ajouts. En rouge, on voit le bâtiment d'origine datant de 1909. Derrière le bâtiment, il y a eu un ajout datant de 1913. Et en arrière, il y a eu un agrandissement au garage datant de 1924. À droite, on voit qu'il y a eu un ajout ultérieurement. Par contre, la date, elle est inconnue. As we see here on the screen, to the left, we see the footprint and the changes and building extensions that took place over the years. The original footprint is outlined in red from 1909. On the rear of the original building, an addition was built in 1913, which is outlined in blue. And as we see outlined in green, there was an addition to the garage dating from 1924. To the right, we see that an addition was later built. It's outlined in yellow. However, the date of this addition is unknown. On voit sur l'écran à gauche l'empreinte au sol du bâtiment existant et à droite, l'empreinte au sol du bâtiment proposé. We see to the left the building footprint of the existing building, and to the right, the building footprint of the proposed building. Et voici l'élévation avant du bâtiment proposé avec une hauteur totale de 127 pieds et 4 pouces qui s'inscrit de façon harmonieuse entre les bâtiments voisins. On the screen, we see the proposed building elevation with a total building height of 127 feet and 4 inches, in keeping with the scale of the neighboring buildings. Voici l'élévation de la façade latérale sud. Here we see the south facade elevation, lateral elevation. And the rear elevation, showing a small roof terrace on the rear facade. On voit à l'écran l'élévation arrière montrant une petite terrasse à l'arrière du bâtiment. Et finalement, l'élévation de la façade latérale nord. And finally, the elevation of the north lateral facade. Et voici en fait le rendu 3D sur la rue Lansdowne qui s'inscrit sur la rue, montrant le contexte du voisinage, des voisins. Here we see the 3D rendering of the proposed building in the context of its neighboring buildings. Merci, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kropas. Thank you for the presentation. We, as I said before, we report that the City Clerk's office received one letter regarding the demolition application within the prescribed time period in which no opposition to the demolition was expressed. So now I will turn to the City Clerk because we will go offline to deliberate just on this proposal and come back. So citizens can, if they are watching, they don't have to log back in or anything. They just stay where they are. Is that correct? Yes? Okay, so thank you. So we will move to the deliberation stage and we will return with the committee's decision. And this is similar to what we would have done in the council chamber. We would have retreated to the general committee room and then come back with a decision of whether we move ahead or if we adjourn on this one as well. So I would say that we are doing that now. We will move to the deliberation. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Sorry about, I know this has been a long meeting for citizens. I still see that we still have, we haven't lost everyone from the call or that we're participating from the beginning of the meeting. So do we have all of council back? Yes, I think so. Okay, so I will now, we have finished our discussions on this file. I don't believe we have any questions to date, but we now move to item 6.4, the committee's decision. So I will hand this over to Councillor Peart, who will render the committee's decision at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have my glass of water here because this is going to be a long one. So I will start with the whereases. Whereas on February 25th, 2020, an application for a demolition permit was submitted to the City of Westmount for the complete demolition of a Category 2 residential building located at 314 to 316 Lansdowne Avenue in order to build a 2-floor residence with a basement. Whereas on February 9th, 2021, the public notices required by law and under the bylaw of the City of Westmount were published. Whereas on February 10th, 2021, a notice was posted at the proposed demolition site. Whereas one comment letter and no opposition letters were received by the City Clerk's office. Whereas given the state of structural failure for which the repair work had not been successful. Whereas the heritage study received determined that the existing building has lost its heritage integrity over the years. Whereas the building is of lesser heritage value, not justifying its preservation given the structural failure. Whereas the authenticity of the building is negligible. Whereas the cost of restoring the building is significant. Whereas a preliminary program for the utilization of the vacated land has been revised and recommended for a favorable decision to the Demolition Committee by the Board of Inspection and by the Planning Advisory Committee on a full demolition basis as submitted in October 2020. Whereas the preliminary program for the utilization of the vacated land is in compliance with all city all applicable city bylaws. Whereas the present building is out of place in its environment and does not contribute to the aesthetic character of the neighborhood. Whereas the dwellings will be vacant as of May 1st, 2021. Whereas the demolition application is made in compliance with all applicable city bylaws. Whereas the demolition committee has studied the application and the preliminary program for the utilization of the vacated land. Whereas the demolition committee is convinced that the demolition is in the public interest and in the interest of the parties. I move that the above considerations constitute an integral part of this resolution. That the demolition committee authorizes the full demolition of the immovable at 314 to 316 Lansdowne Avenue in accordance with the analysis and information provided in the application number 2020-00207 dated February 25th, 2021, pursuant to section 24 of bylaw 1317, bylaw concerning demolition, the whole subject to the following conditions. 1, that a monetary guarantee of $50,000 be provided by the applicant to the city prior to the issuance of a demolition permit for the execution of the preliminary program for the utilization of the vacated land in accordance with section 22 of bylaw 1317. The monetary guarantee may, at the applicant's request, be released upon the completion of the work authorized by the building permit for the program for the utilization of the vacated land. Failing such completion of the work, the monetary guarantee shall be retained, subject to the time limits established under bylaw 1300, permits and certificates bylaw, at the expiration of which the city may make use of this monetary guarantee in the manner provided for under the law. 2, that the building be demolished and construction begin within 12 months of the demolition permit being issued. 3, that prior to the issuance of the demolition permit, a site management report for the demolition and the construction, including a demolition waste reuse plan, must be submitted and approved by the Board of Inspections. 4, that prior to the issuance of a demolition permit, a phasing plan for the demolition work indicating the recommended sequence and methodology signed and sealed by the engineer who is a member of the Ordre des Ingénieurs du Québec must be submitted and approved by the Board of Inspections. 5, that the construction permit be obtained prior to the issuance of the demolition permit. 6, that the co-ownership regulations include the obligation to park in the garage so as not to limit the maneuverability of other co-owners.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peart. Do I have a seconder on this motion? Councillor Lalum. Any further comments on this that were not covered in the whereases? Councillor Peart?
Well, they were covered, and we'll, having looked at this, with us considering this one after having a very long discussion about the previous project, you can see the glaring differences in between the two. It's self-evident to anybody who has walked by or has driven by that this building is in a state of distress, and that any restorative efforts that have been engaged on this property have not been successful, and that future ones are similarly unlikely to be successful. The building as we see it today is a shell of its original construction. The things that made it special in 1909, those features are long gone. There have been some questionable or some non-successful additions that have happened to this building over the years. This is a case where a tool such as the demolition as a demolition bylaw tool is to be used. It calls out for the demolition committee to look at this, to consider it on its face, for its own merits, if it should be subject to a demolition, and there are few, if any, better candidates for such a consideration with this building as we see it right now.
Thank you for the further details on that. So now we would call for a vote. So all in favor? Tout en faveur? Okay. carried. So are there any, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, any submitted questions? I would ask the city clerk just to double check that, or Madame Simard, if we have any further questions. If not, we will.
If I may make another comment, it just popped in my head, Mayor Smith. We are seeing this project here, the replacement project. We are seeing this because this is one of the items that Council, the Demolition Committee, needs to review. What we are approving today is the demolition. We are not. We have just looked at the preliminary program as a replacement project. So there is still a procedure left for the replacement projects to follow through. If the same thing were to have happened for 325 Melville, we would have seen the replacement project at this time as well, because that would have been something that we would have needed to consider at this time. So that we did not see it for 325 Melville, because the meeting was, the session was adjourned. For here, we see it, but we are not reviewing this as a, we are using this to inform our decision about the demolition, not to make a decision about the replacement project.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. And I hope that is clear to those watching and those attending. So if, without seeing any further questions, just one last check, I would call this, I would say that this meeting is adjourned.